Have you ever wondered why some writing advice leaves you more confused than when you started? Or maybe you've been stuck trying to figure out exactly what steps to take next in your writing journey? Either way, I've got something fun and super insightful for you. I created a free quiz that will help you discover your exact next steps to move forward with your novel in just 30 seconds. All you have to do is answer a few quick questions and then bam, you'll get a personalized roadmap tailored specifically to where you are in your writing journey right now. Plus, I'll send you a customized 10-episode podcast playlist, as well as additional resources specifically chosen for where you're at to help you start making lots of progress and get to that next big milestone, whether that's finishing your first draft, revising your novel, or publishing your book. So if you're curious, head over to savannahgilbo.com/quiz to take the quiz now. One more time, that's savannahgilbo.com/quiz to take the quiz and get a personalized roadmap tailored to where you're at in your writing, editing, or publishing journey. Writing a novel is a really massive undertaking, and without the right approach, it's really easy to get lost and stuck. But the other thing I know for sure is that it doesn't have to be this way forever. Once you understand what's really keeping you stuck, you can break free from that cycle and finally finish the book that you've been dreaming about writing. Welcome to the Fiction Writing Made Easy podcast. My name is Savannah Gilbo, and I'm here to help you write a story that works. I want to prove to you that writing a novel doesn't have to be overwhelming. So each week, I'll bring you a brand new episode with simple, actionable, and step-by-step strategies that you can implement in your writing right away. So whether you're brand new to writing or more of a seasoned author looking to improve your craft, this podcast is for you. So pick up a pen and let's get started. Have you ever heard the statistic that says that 97% of adults want to write a book, but only 3% of those people ever actually finish one? Well, in today's episode, we're going to talk about why that is, or why so many aspiring authors who start out with big dreams of writing a novel end up stuck, overwhelmed, and wondering if they're even cut out to be a writer. But before we dive into the details, I have something super exciting to share. My Notes to Novel course is opening for enrollment very soon. This is my signature 8-week program designed to help you confidently write a story you're proud of without the self-doubt, frustration, or overwhelm that stops most writers in their tracks. So if you've been wanting to work with me on your novel and follow a step-by-step framework to turn your ideas into a finished draft, then this is your chance. I'll be sharing more details soon, but if you want to be the first to know when doors open and snag a few extra goodies in the meantime, make sure you're on the waitlist at savannahgilbo.com/waitlist. All right, so let's dive into today's episode. I'm going to break down exactly why this happens, why so many people never finish their books, and more importantly, how you can make sure you're part of that 3% who actually finishes what they start. I think a lot of us can relate to that initial excitement that comes when we have a new idea for a story. We sit down to write, and maybe the first chapter just flows out of us beautifully. The characters feel real, the world feels fun, and it comes alive on the page. But then something starts to shift. All of a sudden, the plot feels really messy, characters aren't coming together in the way you imagined, and you realize that you don't actually know what happens in the middle of your story. Then life gets busy, and suddenly that dream of finishing a novel feels impossible. If this sounds familiar, I want you to know that you are not alone. Writing a novel is a really massive undertaking, and without the right approach, it's really easy to get lost and stuck. But the other thing I know for sure is that it doesn't have to be this way forever. Once you understand what's really keeping you stuck, you can break free from that cycle and finally finish the book that you've been dreaming about writing. So after working with countless aspiring authors, I've identified 5 main reasons why so many writers never make it to the end. So the first roadblock, or the first reason why you might not be finishing the drafts that you start, is that you started writing without a clear plan. And I always say that diving into a novel without a roadmap is like trying to build a house without blueprints. You might make a little progress at first, but eventually you'll run out of steam and you won't know what to do next. Now, many writers start with just a vague idea of their story, and they hope they'll figure it out as they go. But what ends up happening is they reach the dreaded saggy middle and they have no idea how to move forward. And then because there's no plan in place, they end up writing themselves into corners. So characters get introduced but serve no real purpose. Plot threads are started but they're never resolved. Every decision they need to make becomes a struggle because they're not sure if it fits within the bigger picture. So eventually they get so confused about their own story that abandoning it feels like the only option. So if you can relate to this, I want you to know that even a simple outline or creating some kind of roadmap can change everything. So, for example, knowing the key plot points like the inciting incident, the midpoint twist, and the climax, even just identifying a general sense of what happens in these 3 key scenes, that's going to give you a much clearer path to follow than not knowing what anything looks like when you start writing. Now, that's not to say that you need every plot detail figured out, but having those guidepost scenes or the key plot points of your story figured out will help you move in the right direction, especially when doubt creeps in, which we all know that it will. So if you started writing without some kind of plan, and if you're stuck somewhere in the middle, or if you had to give up on a draft, then I would highly encourage you to make some kind of plan. Remember, even just a simple outline, because it really can make a big difference. All right, so that is roadblock number 1, starting without a clear plan. Roadblock number 2 is perfectionism that kills progress. And this one trips up more writers than almost any other issue. So what this looks like is you get stuck trying to make every sentence perfect. You're editing as you write, spending hours rewriting the same paragraph over and over and over. And that little voice in your head insists that you can't move to chapter 2 until chapter 1 is absolutely flawless. And this approach kills momentum completely because instead of making progress on your story, you're instead trapped in an endless cycle of revision. And then you start to dislike your story because you're hyper-focused on its flaws. So eventually you convince yourself that if you can't even get the first chapter right, then what's the point? You'll never be able to write a whole book if this is how it's going to go. But here's the truth that successful writers who finish their books and go on to publish their books, here's what they understand. Your first draft does not need to be perfect. It just needs to exist. And you've probably heard some version of this advice all over the internet, but it is true that you can't edit a blank page, but you can always improve a messy first draft. And it is true that the magic happens in revisions, but first you need something to revise to enable that magic to happen. So if you think this is the reason you're getting stuck or the reason that you've given up on manuscripts in the past, then I want you to try to give yourself permission to write something that isn't perfect. Because the thing is, that's not just a band-aid to help you move forward. It's actually a necessary step for you to finish your novel, right? You need to get the story out of your head and onto the page, and only then can you revise what you come up with. All right, so that is roadblock number 2, perfectionism that kills progress. Roadblock number 3 is information overwhelm that paralyzes progress. And it's no secret that in today's world, there is an overwhelming amount of writing advice available, right? You read blog posts about story structure, you watch YouTube videos about character development, you buy course after course, hoping one of them will finally unlock the secret to finishing your novel. And the irony of it is that all of this learning is often what keeps people from writing. So instead of becoming a practicing writer, you become a perpetual student. You might know more about writing theory than many published authors do, but you still can't seem to apply it to your own work. And even worse, every piece of advice seems to contradict the last thing you read, leaving you second-guessing every decision and frozen by all the conflicting rules and advice. If you can relate to this, I promise you are not alone. It happens way more than you think. And here's what I've learned from working with writers who get stuck in this particular roadblock over the years. You really don't need to master everything about writing before you start. You just need to take the next step and focus on what's in front of you. And the best advice I can give you is to choose one proven process or one method and commit to it all the way to the end of a draft. So stop consuming all the conflicting information out there, all the different advice, and just choose one process or one method, commit to it, and move forward. Because remember, progress is going to beat perfection every single time when it comes to finishing your novel. Okay, so that is roadblock number 3, information overwhelm that freezes your forward progress. Roadblock number 4 is fear that stops you in your tracks. Fear shows up in more ways than you might expect when you're trying to finish a novel. There's the obvious fear of failure. So what if your book isn't good enough? What if people hate it, right? But there's also the less obvious fear of success. What if your book is actually really good? Will you ever be able to write another one that measures up to that first book? Or what will you do if people start expecting too much from you, right? It's the other side of the coin. And no matter what kind of fear you're feeling, whenever fear takes control, excuses tend to multiply. So suddenly you feel like you need to start doing more research, or maybe you feel like you don't have the right writing space, or you're not in the right headspace, or maybe it'll be different this weekend. You might even start other projects to avoid finishing the one you're working on and things like that, right? But deep down, what's happening is you're protecting yourself from both the possibility of failure and the pressure that comes with potential success. So if you are dealing with this particular roadblock, the key to moving past it lies in shifting your focus from the outcome to progress. Every word you write is progress, regardless of the quality. And I want you to remember, too, that every draft you write teaches you something valuable, even if it never sees the light of day. And the only real failure is letting your fear stop you from trying to write a book or finishing the books that you start. And I think it's also important to remember that published authors aren't the ones who never felt fear, right? They're the ones who wrote the book and finished the book despite feeling fear. Because at the end of the day, we're all human. We all feel some version of fear when it comes to doing something new and something big and something important like writing a novel. Okay, so that is roadblock number 4, fear that stops you in your tracks. Roadblock number 5 is writing in isolation without support. And we all know that writing is inherently a solitary activity, right? But that does not mean you have to go at it alone when trying to finish your novel. In fact, without accountability or support, it's going to be incredibly easy to lose motivation when life gets hectic or when you hit one of these inevitable roadblocks. And the reason for that is because there's no external pressure to keep going. There's no one cheering you on when things get tough. And I think for most of us, when we write in isolation, our novels become the first thing to go when life gets busy, right? We stop setting aside time for our projects because no one else knows about our goals and our deadlines but ourselves. And then that doubt creeps in about whether our stories are even worth telling because we're not able to make time for it and we're not making progress and things like that. So without some kind of outside encouragement or understanding or even accountability from other people who get the struggle that comes with writing a novel, it's very easy to drift away from the work altogether. So if you feel like you're struggling with this particular roadblock, then I want you to know this. Having someone to cheer you on and hold you accountable can change the entire game. Whether it's a critique group, a writing buddy, or an online community, surrounding yourself with other writers who understand what you're doing, the journey you're on, and things like that, that's going to provide the motivation and support that you need to push through when times get tough. You do not have to do it alone. There are so many other people out there on the same journey as you who probably don't want to do it alone either. And sometimes all it takes is reaching out on social media or joining some kind of online community or something like that to find your perfect writing buddy. All right, so that is roadblock number 5, writing in isolation without support. Now, here's the encouraging news. The writers who finish their novels aren't necessarily the most talented or the ones with unlimited time. They're simply the ones who have learned to work with a clear process, embrace the imperfection, and stay consistent. They understand that writing a novel is more like a marathon, not a sprint. And they've learned to work with their limitations instead of against them. They've embraced the messy magic of writing a first draft, and they know that done beats perfect every single time. The writers who finish their books, they didn't start with some kind of magical advantage or special talent. They simply learned what works and applied it consistently. They gave themselves permission to write imperfectly, celebrated small wins along the way, and refused to give up when things got challenging. So the difference between finishing and not finishing often comes down to having the right roadmap, the right mindset, and the right support system working together. I know it might feel like those successful writers have something you don't, but here's the truth. Every finished novel started with someone just like you, someone with an idea, some self-doubt, and a dream to tell their story. And the writers who finish aren't the ones who never hit the roadblocks that we talked about in today's episode. They're the ones who learn to navigate around them and finish anyway. Imagine if you commit to pushing past these roadblocks today. Imagine where you could be in 6 to 12 months from now. Instead of still wondering if you can even write a novel, you could be holding your completed first draft in your hands. Instead of feeling like you're a wannabe writer, you could be confidently calling yourself a capital A author. Instead of looking back on another year of unfulfilled dreams, you could be already planning to publish your book or outlining your next book. So in my opinion, the question isn't whether you have what it takes to write a novel. You absolutely do. The question really is whether you're ready to stop letting these 5 roadblocks define your entire writing journey. All right, now real quick before I let you go, I want to let you know that I have a free guide that talks about all the roadblocks we went over today. So it explains what the roadblocks are, why they happen, and then gives you the strategies to break through each one of the roadblocks. You'll also see some case studies and examples in there of writers just like you who have broken through these roadblocks and gone on to finish their books. So if you want to download that, it's totally free. Go to savannahgilbo.com/roadblocks. And if you want to get my help busting through these 5 roadblocks, if you want to work with me on your novel and learn my step-by-step framework to turn your ideas into a finished draft, then get on the waitlist for my Notes to Novel course, which will be opening for enrollment again very soon. Go to savannahgilbo.com/waitlist to get on the waitlist and snag a few extra goodies in the meantime, and you'll be the first to know when enrollment opens for that. All right, so that's it for this episode of the Fiction Writing Made Easy podcast. Head over to savannahgilbo.com/podcast for the complete show notes, including the resources I mentioned today, as well as bonus materials to help you implement what you've learned. And if you're ready to get more personalized guidance for your specific writing stage, whether you're just starting out, stuck somewhere in the middle of a draft, drowning in revisions, or getting ready to publish, take my free 30-second quiz at savannahgilbo.com/quiz. You'll get a customized podcast playlist that'll meet you right where you're at and help you get to your next big milestone. Last but not least, make sure to follow this podcast in your podcast player of choice, because I'll be back next week with another episode full of actionable tips, tools, and strategies to help you become a better writer. Until then, happy writing.